Patrick at Pals, and we've got the Jeep in here, and the rear brakes are going to go back together. Kendall, can you show us how to assemble rear brakes on a Jeep?
Yeah, so we're going to replace the rotors and the pads on this vehicle.
Okay, so you're putting the rotor on. This is called a top hat rotor, right?
Of course, yep.
And it's going over the parking brakes that I showed you in the last video.
Yep, parking brakes are on the inside of the rotor there.
So now we've got the rotor on. What's next?
All right, so next thing is the parking or brake caliper bracket.
Okay. And you're going to put that in, and that's held in with 2 bolts, right?
That's correct. 2 big bolts in the back.
And that carries the pads, right?
Yes.
Carries the pads and the pusher of the caliper, right? The piston?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
The bracket is the one that actually takes on all the stress of the stopping.
Okay.
The stopping friction and force. So you want to make sure that's good and tight and everything's in good condition on that.
Now, do you put these at a certain torque, or do you just tighten them up and they're good?
So most cars have a torque spec, but you can more or less tighten it up and get a good feel for it.
Okay.
Of course, the larger the bolt, you want to give it a little more torque to it. Then you can go back through if you need to and retorque them with a torque wrench.
Okay. Okay. Great.
So I start out with just doing it by hand and then go back through it with the torque wrench.
With the torque wrench at the end. Okay, so you're going to tighten it up now. And folks, this has to be done, whether it's front or rear, the system is the same. They all have carriers like this. They all have bolts. And now what are you putting in there, Kendall?
This is the brake pad shim.
Okay, so that's a shim.
Yeah.
That's what it rides on and slides on, right?
Yes, and
okay.
It's more or less spring-loaded. It's going to hold it in there nice and tight, but not too tight. It also keeps most of the noise down, so you don't have any squeaking or issues later on.
And you always inspect those and make sure that they're in good quality condition.
Yes.
Or they're replaced.
Yes.
Okay. And what's next?
I'm going to run around here, grab the pads, I'll be right back.
Well, that would be great. And folks, you can see the piston right up here. This is the brake caliper. The brake line's coming into the back of it. And then the pads, one pad's going to be on the inside here, the other pad's going to be on the outside here. And they'll go over the rotor. We're going to show you how that works. Kendall's bringing the pads right now. And you can see we use quality parts. These are CarQuest brakes, and they're excellent for these vehicles. We look at the application. This is an off-road vehicle. We talk to the customer. What are you going to use it for? And then we choose the right brake pads for that job. Now, what is that you're putting on the pads?
This is brake grease. You want to put it on all the contact points except for the rotor and the pad itself. You want to put it on the ears of the pads here. And fit into the shims.
And that allows them to slide easier, right?
Yes.
And lubricates it. It also stops noise. And you can see he's putting on the back pad now. So that's the inboard pad. This is the outboard pad that he just put on. Now you've got your brakes ready to go. Now, you're not going to be able to see this in a moment because the caliper is going to come on, folks.
Then you also want to lube the slide pins. Even though this has plenty of grease on it, put a nice coat on there, it's still good.
Okay, and the slide pins, that's how the caliper slides in and out, right?
That's correct.
And you're taking the other one out now. So there's 2 pins, and you can see we want to keep them well lubed. So you can imagine, folks, if you take your Jeep out in the dirt and the mud, you're going to have to take them apart like this, clean and re-lubricate the vehicle. That's part of the maintenance if you take it off-road a lot. And what you got there?
This is a piston compressor.
Okay, a piston
caliper piston compressor.
Right. So it's gonna decompress the caliper, put the piston back into the bore so that it'll fit over the new pads, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
You just want to go nice and slow with it. You don't want to go too fast. You want to feel if it's binding up. If it's binding up, then you're looking at replacing the caliper because the seals on side have been.
So this piston is going into this bore, and if that cocks or if it binds in any way, we need to replace the caliper.
That's correct.
A lot of times cars come in and the calipers are stuck, and that's what we're talking about. That piston won't move. If you can't move that piston, you've got to replace the caliper. And generally you see that by it wearing the pad out on one side and not the other. and destroying the rotor. Now you're lubricating the backs of the pads, right?
Yes.
And that's where the piston is going to set.
All the contact points, you want to make sure that's lubed up.
Okay. You're going to put that inside. Okay.
That.
And then we're going to put in 2 pins and tighten it down. So folks, we've got the pins, and then we've got the bolts that hold the caliper on.
Yeah.
And now the next step is to tighten that up, right? Okay. And after you tighten this up, what's the step after that?
Then you go back through and just torque everything. If it's too tight, you want to back it off and then retighten it again, and then tighten it to the correct torque step.
And then what about the brake fluid? So we've got brake fluid coming down here.
Yes.
What do you do after you get all done? Are we going to leave the brake fluid alone? Will we flush it? Does the flush get done first? How does that work?
So I typically like to do a flush afterwards.
Okay.
This particular vehicle, we tested the fluid on it and it tested out good. So this time we're not doing a flush on it, but the fluid is still in good condition, so we're good with that.
And we always check that each time that it comes in. Well, folks, it's going to get real noisy here, so I'm going to drop off on this video, but that's how easy it is to put together brakes. However, it's very technical. If you don't do it properly, you can really get hurt. We had a vehicle come in last week, and you can see where the hose goes into this caliper on the bottom. The customer had it going in at the top, and the vehicle did not stop. So if you're going to do your own work, make sure that you have the technical ease to get it done. Otherwise, bring it to PALS. See you soon.